Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for your patience as we got this set up. We're going to be doing a video. We've got someone calling in. We're mixing in all the good stuff for this panel presentation. So my name is Deb Kutzka. I am an Assistant Deputy Chief Administrative Officer with Cook County's Bureau of Administration, and I've been coordinating the Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee as well as the policy development for the past many months. I'm so happy to have you all here so that you can learn more about environmental justice, the policy, and what we did to co-design and co-create this policy together with community members. Cook County made a commitment to develop an environmental justice policy as part of its COVID response plan, and it was also a recommendation from the Equity Fund Task Force. Staff in the Department of Environment and Sustainability built an internal working group with representatives from several county departments as well as the Department of Public Health, to begin developing a shared understanding of what environmental justice is and what it means for Cook County. Knowing that community involvement early on is essential, in 2023, staff worked together to develop an Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee. We worked together with County's internal working group to develop the draft EJ policy, which was presented earlier this year to the public. Today, we will share more about that process with each of you, how we can continue to incorporate meaningful community engagement and policy and program development, and share some of the most pressing issues that arose throughout this process. Today, I am joined by members of our Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee, as well as members of our internal working group. I would like to introduce Apostle Carl White Jr. on the phone.
I bless you with love and happiness.
Thank you, Apostle White. He is a member of our EJCAC and Southland Ministerial Health Network, as well as Jerry Garl.
Hi, everyone.
She is also an EJCAC member and part of Environmental Justice Evanston. We also have Neha Soni.
Hi, everyone.
Our Senior Planner of Strategic Planning and Policy in Cook County's Department of Transportation and Highways. And Elfrida Holloway.
Hi, everyone.
She's our Director of Epidemiology from Cook County's Department of Public Health. So, that being said, I would like to set the stage for today's discussion with a short video that was created by our communications team here at the county and recently won a NACO Achievement Award so that we can all understand what environmental justice is and what it looks like here in the county.
Climate change is a complicated, difficult issue, and sometimes it's difficult for people to get their heads around it. Environmental challenges are not equally distributed across geography or across communities, and historically, communities of color have been more impacted by natural catastrophes and man-made challenges. I think we have to understand that government policy has allowed communities to be constructed in places that were unsafe for the residents.
So in the summer of 2024, our Department of Environment and Sustainability created a public environmental justice survey. And our goal was to collect input from residents and community members about what your top environmental justice concerns and possible ideas for solutions are.
The county has been a real leader on issues of equity and the environment. And I think our leadership now on environmental justice is putting those two together.
Ultimately, environmental justice is about the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of community members and residents, regardless of race, gender, class, etc.
When my daughter comes home and says, "Mommy, do we recycle?" Or "Mommy, why is it hazy outside today?" I realize that I need to be more intentional about my focus on environmental justice and doing my part.
If you are breathing high particulate air every day and you're not drinking clean water, and you are in a heat-distressed area, you're gonna have a lower life expectancy.
I think the survey really highlights that environmental justice is a priority issue. It is an everyday issue for people across Cook County.
Across the county, the top issues which respondents marked as extremely concerned included drinking water for 58% of respondents, followed by safe and healthy housing at 49%, access to healthy food at 47.9%, reliable and affordable energy at 47%, resilience to climate change at 45.7%, air pollution at 44.4%, and having an industrial facility in their neighborhood at 43.5%. And in the open-ended responses, respondents confirmed that the top three things were air pollution, clean drinking water, and healthy food.
as a governmental entity, we can support greener infrastructure, we can plant more trees, we can focus on industrial composting to divert waste from landfills. There's a lot that we can do and push.
And we need to focus on what we're doing to create a better environment, a better planet, a better climate, a better world for us now, but most importantly for the people who are coming behind us.
And we need, as government, to try to help those communities address the challenges they face. You know, across the bureaus in Cook County, we're working to make our communities cleaner, safer.
That video is available on the county's YouTube site if you'd like to watch it again, share with your friends. All right, so thank you so much. Before we get into the discussion about the policy itself and our conversation with our panelists, I'd like each of them to introduce themselves with a bit more information about why they chose to engage with this program and how it aligns with their work. So we'll start with Apostle White.
Bless you. I'm Apostle Carl White, Jr. I'm the pastor of Victory Christian International Ministries, and I'm the president of the Southland Ministerial Health Network, where we give out information, inspiration, and resources. We meet once a month where we share with the community. We bring people from all areas of the community and occupations so that we can talk. And we try to give back information so that the people could take it and use it wisely and help our county be better. And we appreciate so very much the things that we've been able to do in the community. We also were able to reach out and help we got the casino that came to the south suburbs that we needed to help us get some money in the area of we were only 40-something thousand a year in households in Harvey and the other areas around Harvey. And we've been able to do a lot of things. And so we got jobs for people. We were able to get some things cleaned up in our community through them. And we are doing even more now to expand that. And so I just want to be a part of this, to know what's going on in the community and how we can better, as pastors and leaders, help our community.
Thank you. Jerry.
Thanks, Deb. I'm Jerry Garl. I'm co-chair of Environmental Justice Evanston, and I really appreciate this opportunity today. I'm an active volunteer involved in environmental and climate justice work through Climate Action Evanston, our umbrella organization. I am also retired after over 40 years of working in environmental programs at the state and federal level, 34 years of which was right down the street at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. When Environmental Justice Evanston was first created as a subcommittee of the Evanston Environment Board, we were focused on the task of writing an environmental justice ordinance. And we wanted to ensure that the operation of a waste transfer station in the midst of a predominantly black residential neighborhood that was historically redlined in the 5th Ward of Evanston could never happen again. And we worked on that for several years. We found out very unfortunately that drafting such an ordinance was much harder than we imagined, and we ended up settling on an EJ resolution, which finally was passed by our city council in 2020. The resolution declared environmental justice as policy of the city of Evanston. It committed the city to developing an EJ mapping tool to document the actual environmental discrepancies and disparities in impacted neighborhoods. It committed the city to enact a consistent and more meaningful public engagement policy. And finally, it developed, it called for developing the EJ ordinance that would be needed to put teeth in those commitments to equity. So some of that work has started, but in the past 5 years since it passed, much of it still needs to be done. More recently, our organization has partnered with other Evanston groups working on environmental equity, like the Evanston Cradle to Career, the NAACP, the YWCA, the League of Women Voters, and many others, to form the Evanston EJ Coalition to help us collaborate more effectively. For our part, Environmental Justice Evanston continues to serve as a watchdog to hold the city accountable for achieving the goals of the EJ resolution. And in addition, we've had excellent support and assistance from Josina Marita, who you saw in the film. She's our 13th District County Board Commissioner, and she has led an EJ initiative for several years, convening a group of local EJ activists to help explore solutions for our area. And then finally, I'm really grateful to work alongside other Cook County communities in the CAC who are seeking to accomplish environmental equity. This collaboration is really important to us. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me as well. I'm Neha Soni, Senior Planner with Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways with the Bureau of Strategic Planning and Policy. So I joined Cook County last year, so I'm pretty recent here, but before that I worked as a design consultant with Epstein Global, headquartered here in Chicago in their civil engineering team. And my background is in architecture, urban design, and planning. However, most of my work now focuses on resilient transportation solutions in response to current urban challenges. And what excites me the most is being able to bring technical design and planning solutions together to create built environments that are reflective of the needs and aspirations of people. So in my current role, I work on a lot of initial phases of transportation projects. So it could be looking at planning, policy development, funding, programming, looking into feasibility studies, and going into like phase one, which is the early design of transportation projects, where a lot of the key decisions are taken early on. And the best part of my work is being able to help communities who often lack resources and technical capacity in order to implement transportation improvements. So, when we think of transportation as a common perception, oftentimes people think of roadways and, filling in potholes or just repaving like the surface of roads. But, transportation is so much more beyond just that. And, for example, like just years back, our department was called Department of Highways. Now it's called Department of Transportation and Highways. And there's a reason why, then even the name was changed. So we have to look at the transportation needs of different communities, and not all communities are the same. So especially working with like suburban Cook County communities where they would have very different transportation needs than, let's say, people who are living within the city of Chicago, let's say. And so we have to look at not just roadways, but let's say we have a Cook County bike plan. What does that mean? How do we go about implementing a bike plan? How do we offer those different modes and choices of transportation so that people are able to get around and are able to connect to opportunities and resources that they need? We also have a Cook County transit plan. Although Cook County do not operate transit as an operating agency, but we have a county transit plan where we support infrastructure in ways that could support transit. And even these two plans together also work together and offer benefits to the residents of Cook County. And also making, walking around. Let's say we look at sidewalks, or how do we make pedestrian infrastructure which is comfortable and safe for people to get by nearby areas, walk safely for children to walk to school or walk to a park. So there are, again, we also have to look at freight plan, or we have a lot of railroads in Cook County, and oftentimes, there are competing users and interest, on a limited space, where, we also would like a bike lane, but, we also have to accommodate a lot of truck traffic to support certain industries as well. So it's a pretty complex process that we go through, and it always first starts with understanding what the communities are looking for to have in that neighborhood. So always listening to people, getting their feedback and input. That first we try and see what the needs are. How do we define those problems? After we identify those problems, then we would, arrive to like recommendations through different reports that could put a vision for next 5 years, 10 years down the line, and looking into an integrated modes of transportation. So it's much more complex, and we are very glad to be part of the EJ panel because there's so much more that we could feed into the transportation. Looking through this EJ framework. I was just looking at the video where we show air pollution being on the top, and there is a direct correlation between how our transportation works and how the environment, certain harmful emissions that come from transportation, and what we could do about that. How can we promote low emissions mode of transportation like biking or walking or taking transit. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, and I will talk more about what we do at our department DOT and share my experience further. Thank you.
Thank you. Frida.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frida Holloway. I'm the Director of Epidemiology at the Cook County Department of Public Health. Some of my background has been, I've been with the county for 6 years, so right before COVID started. I'm also a research assistant professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. My background is around surveillance, and that means monitoring and tracking data over time. That is available through our public health system. It's available through our census data for rate creation. We get from the EPA. We get data from a lot of open source data platforms to help us understand our communities throughout. And we got involved with the Environmental Justice Committee as part of the department, with the Department of Transportation and Highway Safety, because we were very interested in suicide, and a lot of suicide is done in railroads crossings and things like that. So that is kind of how we initially got involved. And so when we think about environment, we of course think about air and the land, but we also think about environments within people, right, and how they see themselves. So environment became a bigger word for us, and it is integrated in that way. Also, from my department, because we are in surveillance of data that is non-infectious disease, so that's more population health statistics. We look at deaths, morbidity, so things like hospitalization, inpatient, outpatient data, those sort of things. We really are able to support various sister agencies with information from public health that helps them understand the communities, that looks at hot spots and disparities, show where we need to be allocating resources and tracking those resources over time. We do population-based surveys that enable us to ask our communities what are their risks, what are their exposures, what are their experiences throughout life, and how do we help to assess that and then support that information. So we're really thrilled to be a part of this committee. It shows a more holistic approach to the county work and how we can integrate and work together. Before COVID, the health department didn't have as much money as we would like, but having these sort of collaborations did support a lot of our work. So when we did get money through a lot of COVID funding, we were able to execute things so well. We developed programming, we've developed dashboards, we've developed community engagement activities and programs throughout. And so we've really been able to capitalize on the funding that was available for a certain amount of time, and we're sustaining it because we had the ideas and the creativity of committee work like this, and so we continue to do that. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it later. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So hopefully everybody in the room and online can see, the expansive expertise and passion that our team members have brought to this entire process. And this is only a subset of the 2 teams that we've had working on this policy. So we're going to jump into, as I mentioned, a quick overview of the process of developing developing this policy, some of the specific content within it, for those of you who aren't familiar, and then we'll get into our panel discussion. So as a real quick timeline, we've been working on getting an environmental justice policy or environmental justice work really formally incorporated into the county's work since 2019. That started with a UIC capstone seminar where folks came in and they did a lot of research and looked at existing environmental justice data and tools and mapping. And then they looked at Cook County specifically and made some proposals about how we could reflect some of that data here and have it be accurate for our use in the county. There wasn't a formal tool that came out of that, but we have lots of baseline, and we worked very closely with our GIS department in our Bureau of Technology, who is really key in helping us bring that data into some visualizations. Then in 2020, the EJ policy development, as I mentioned, was included in the COVID-19 response plan, since those ties between public health and environmental justice are very clear. We formed our internal working group in 2021. And then in 2022, it was also included to develop an environmental justice policy as part of our Equity Fund Task Force recommendations. So the Equity Fund Task Force is another amazing project that's being coordinated through our Office of the President, where we also have community members, organizations who are able to provide insight into how we can use the policy roadmap, our strategic plan, to incorporate and include equity in the work that we're doing. In 2023, our Board of Commissioners passed a resolution, so speaking of Jerry's resolution that she mentioned, this is one of the first steps for us formalizing this work, where they were able to present that this is work that needs to be done and kind of gave us the directive to say, yes, we are committing to developing a policy. And in 2024 is when we formed our Community Advisory Committee, which we'll share a little bit more. We also conducted focus groups, stakeholder interviews, and the community survey that was mentioned in the video earlier. So all of that helped to create a lot of information that we could then use to put into words, and we released our first draft of the environmental justice policy in January of 2025. So a lot's been happening, but we've done a lot of work to get us to this point. And really, I just want to let folks know that there's a lot of inside background work that needs to be done to get us all on the same shared understanding, again, of what environmental justice is, and that it doesn't necessarily directly tie to environment and trees like some people think it does, that it really has all of these other implications and factors that are considered. So the purpose of the policy itself is to redress historical environmental injustices and promote equity here in Cook County. It also helps us establish an environmental justice framework that we can then use in our decision making. So whether that's program development or how we engage with community members, whether that's policies we develop, it will give us that lens to look through and evaluate where our resources and time and efforts should go. And very key in this work is that we're trying to center those most impacted by environmental harm in Cook County. For here, the policy itself covers offices under the president, so not all Cook County agencies. We're really looking at the ones that fall under this particular umbrella. But even though we've got smart, engaged people who work here at the county and everyone brings their own story to it, it's very important for us to connect with community members, with residents, with leaders of local community organizations to hear what they are experiencing on a daily basis. So maybe we create a great program, we think, from this side, and we put it out there, and then residents every day are like, see what you're doing, but it actually caused these other impacts, or it's not showing up in our community the same way that maybe you intended it to. So that's how this will help guide us in our development. The policy also helps us to ensure accountability, again, through community engagement and really being transparent in our reporting, whether we are doing great, whether we're not doing so great, where we can make improvements, or where we just need more data and action in order to get something set. And the document itself is intended to be a living document. So it's not going to stay static. As we continue, as we work over the years, we will be updating the policy, the physical, I shouldn't say, sometimes it's physical, I printed out copies, digital document that will be available to the public with public input as well. Okay, so a little bit then of background about environmental justice. And you got a snapshot of this in the video. So we're gathered here today, this week, for Racial Equity Week. We're having really intense conversations about how we see racial equity and inequity throughout Cook County. And when it comes to environment and health, low-income communities of color have historically been disproportionately impacted by things like pollution, whether that's air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, kind of coming from all different angles. Also, historical practices like redlining and different exclusionary policies have set folks in already with certain, I would say, limitations on their ability to achieve health or to achieve economy in the way that other parts of the county may not have. We are really a great bed of development for environmental justice work here in the Chicago and the Cook County area. The movement itself has roots here in Chicago with Hazel Johnson. Those of you who live in the city of Chicago may have heard of a Hazel Johnson ordinance that the city of Chicago is working on. She's someone who was seeing the direct impacts of negative environmental impacts on her family. So cancer development, folks getting sick, seeing it in her spouse and her family members, and she devoted her life then to making a commitment, making her voice heard, making sure that community members could stand up and be part of the process. And so we recognize here at Offices Under the President that we have a responsibility to address those past injustices, to recognize them, and to actively work forward to creating solutions, not just as us, as a county staff, but with our community members. So this EJ policy is one piece of that. It isn't like the be-all, end-all. It's not going to fix everything. It's not meant to, but it's helping us to have these conversations and to bring the right people together. So the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, as we've alluded to, was formed to co-develop this policy. It was very important that our community members be part of the process of having the conversations and developing the language, rather than us creating something and just giving it to folks for them to respond to. It centers community voices and lived experiences, and our members represent diverse communities throughout Cook County. So there are 13 total members of our EJCAC, and again, we've got 2 who are representative today, but you can see from the list that we've got folks from across the county with different expertise and different lived experiences, so that everybody was able to share their personal reactions, as well as their community members and how they've seen the influence of environmental justice or injustices in their neighborhoods. And that team worked together, as I mentioned, with our internal working group, which is made up of several different OUP offices, as well as the Department of Public Health. So we've got those represented here today. We also have Justice Advisory Council, Department of Emergency Management and Regional Security, our Bureau of Technology. Again, lots of folks coming together under the same intent of trying to work together to see how environmental justice impacts their work and look for intersections. So an overview of the guiding principles, these are some of the first things we as a community advisory committee worked to develop. And I shouldn't say we, because I wasn't developing them. Our community members were the ones who were throwing out the ideas. We just helped to coordinate those conversations. The first one is the Jemez Principles for Environmental Justice, which folks can go ahead and Google later if you want the full list. But it's got a lot of components of ethical land use, equitable public policy, self-determination. Again, making sure that folks are at the table where decisions are being made before they are made. We also recognize, again, the disproportionate environmental burdens on communities of color that lead to racially disparate health and socioeconomic outcomes. Again, recognizing OUP plays a role in improving environmental quality as well as repairing some of those past injustices in EJ communities, and emphasizing the community partnership and empowerment of all of the different groups throughout the county so that we can rectify past harms. Throughout this work, anyone who works in environmental justice, I think, is able to see the links between systemic racism and practices of environmental racism. They go hand in hand, and we can look at data, and we can hear stories from community members where this is really reflected. And finally, that education on environmental justice is essential to increase community awareness as well as engagement. So through the survey that was mentioned in the video, public survey, the focus groups, the stakeholder groups, we came up with the top focus areas where we wanted to kind of guide our conversation for this framework. So you can see them on the screen. It includes things such as air pollution, access to clean drinking water, climate resiliency, access to healthy food, community engagement, transit and transportation, lack of trees and green space, as well as economic development and jobs. It's really important for me to call out that community engagement is its own focus area of this work. Again, because you can't do environmental justice work if you're not engaging and incorporating with community members in a meaningful and real way. So that was proposed in the document itself that we developed. We put that out to the public in January of this year, and we held a number of different town hall events, as well as opened up a public forum for folks to submit their feedback on via Microsoft Form. So our goal was to try to just engage with folks throughout the county of different backgrounds and find out what they thought of this. It was our first go. We had over 200 individuals who participated in the town hall events, either virtually or in person, and then we broke down all of the notes that we received from the various ways of folks providing them, whether that be through email, through the form, or in person, and we pulled the common themes. So air quality was certainly one of the top ones. Concerns about industrial emissions, like we've already briefly alluded to, as well as inconsistent monitoring of those emissions. Water and flooding was very high up. We know that there is persistent flooding in a lot of our communities, as folks have recently experienced. Lead contamination as well as aging infrastructure. There was talk of climate resilience and needing proactive strategies so that we can address climate impacts. Green space and food access, lots of requests for more trees and local food sources. Community engagement, again, the need for accessible multilingual resources and education. Policy implementation, a lot of folks were saying, this is great on paper, but what are you gonna do about it? Where's the accountability? Who do we come to if we don't see it playing out in real life? And what's that enforcement that's gonna take place? And then finally, there was a whole bucket of what we call other concerns, which didn't fit into one of these other topics, but that folks wanted to bring up. So that included housing, safety of residences, mental health benefits, as Elfrida alluded to earlier in her introduction as well, utility costs, and waste and recycling. So what we did then with this information is we put it all together in a package, and we shared it with our internal working group, with our community advisory committee, and we said, what do you think? How do we update our draft to incorporate this feedback from community members? And what can we do to improve the document? So we've been making those changes. I don't have an updated one to share for you yet because that's still going through the review process, but I can tell you that some of the things that we did were incorporate a new focus area on solid waste, for example. It's something that we've talked about. We have a whole solid waste plan for the county, but we didn't necessarily call it out specifically as a focus area. So that's something new that we're planning on introducing in the updated document. And as I mentioned, it's currently in review. The next step, once that language is approved, is it will go before the board for them to do their approval. Another big piece of this policy that was an action item for us was to hire environmental justice staff here at the county. There aren't any staff that are specifically working on these issues. And so I'm very happy to share that we posted the position, we received applicants, and I hopefully will be interviewing and hiring our two environmental justice staff in the next couple of months. So very excited about that process. And again, it's a way that we can show action and commitment from the county side that we're committed to doing this work. And then from there, it's evaluating the programs and policies through this EJ framework and seeing where we can improve. So with that being said, I will stop talking in a minute after I ask my first question, because I'd like our panelists to be able to share more information with you all about their experiences. So, again, there are 13 members of our EJCAC, and I'm really happy that Gerald and Apostle White, just Gerald, combined your first and last name, that Jerry and Apostle White are here to join us and share their experiences. Can you each share why you chose to participate in this committee, a bit about your role, and what you found beneficial about the process? Apostle White?
Yes. As being a pastor in the community and being a community activist, and we have also a building with Southland Ministerial Health Network, which is, we give out, as I said, information and inspiration, and resources. And we needed the information that you're talking about now, and I'm glad you're putting it in a booklet so we can be able to have it to share with pastors about areas of things and concerns with environmental justice. A lot of the things that you're saying is what's happening in our community. We're not getting the information that we need to give out, and by putting it in the booklet and putting it so we can explain it to people, because we do more than just preaching on Sunday morning, but we are reaching out in communities, and when kids get some kind of rashes or get some things going on, or the water is not right, and we've had some flooding in the south suburb recently, and I'm sure you know about that. And we're wondering how we can get the information about things that are going on to help the community. A lot of our houses have been being torn down, and then when we were in the suburbs of Dixmoor and all the water, we had a big meeting there and invited the Water Reclamation District to come out and share with us what they could do or what kind of help can happen. And it ended up that President Prepwinkle really stepped in and helped us get it cleaned up in Dixmoor so they could have fresh water. Those pipes were so old and they were bursting underground and so forth. So I'm thankful. I'm glad to be a part of this, and I want to be able to share even more with some of the information that you have just suggested that we'll be getting, and some of the things we can give to you. Not only do we want you to give to us, but we want to be able to come back to you and let you know the things that we think needs to be looked at.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a key part of this whole effort too, right, is receiving that information and the feedback so that we can have a continued back and forth. It's not just one-sided. Jerry.
Exactly.
Great. Yes, I'd like to underscore Apostle White's comments about the back and forth nature of this experience. I was really eager to be part of it, just to meet other community activists and be part of this larger conversation about equity and the responsibility of both municipal and county or regional governments to take action to address inequities. So it's been very enlightening and a very satisfying journey so far. We spent the first several years since we started our organization in 2014 figuring out what environmental justice was. You know, does it include affordable housing? Yes. Does it include all these other things that people don't think of as environmental? Yes. So you've done a remarkable job framing the issue and allowing us to move forward. We're really grateful for that. It's also led to a realization that our own experience in Evanston really echoes the environmental inequities and disproportionate impacts on the quality of life and health outcomes in other areas of the county. We've been very fortunate in Evanston to have an active public health department and Office of Sustainability who's gathered information about health impacts. And in 2022, we first learned about the 13-year life expectancy discrepancy between the predominantly black area, a census tract, and an adjacent census tract that is all white, 13-year life expectancy difference. And it really, even for those of us who'd been working on environmental justice for a while, it really opened our eyes and surprised us. So data is incredibly important. That's where it all comes from. And the city, because of that, in part, agreed to fund an environmental equity investigation last year, which will be concluded within the next month or so. And that will go further to identify some of the disparities and differences in lived experiences and to recommend specific mitigation actions. We've had a series of public workshops where residents engaged in some frank conversations about their lived experiences, the conditions of their neighborhood, and their access to city services. So we look forward to learning from other communities in the CAC about how they've approached this sort of problem solving and hope to share our findings within the context of the Cook County EJ policy.
Thank you. Alfreda, from your role on the internal working group, what do you feel was the most important aspect of engaging with the EJCAC through this policy development process? And how have you incorporated the experience or any specific conversations into your work here at the county?
Thanks, Deb. I think one of the most important things in supporting public health and so that we can support our communities is understanding what is needed. And so through this sort of policy development and this committee work, it's really helped guide us to what is important for people to have. And from an epidemiology lens, and epidemiology is just a science of public health, we look at distributions of diseases across time amongst population groups and really stratify by age, race, and sex, sexual identity, things like that to showcase how we are able to impact those populations throughout the data framework. But being a science, we can only do as much as we can do, right? Like we can understand data, we can analyze it, but how do we then help support our communities? And so that is where the policy group helps. Now we know what we need to do, what kinds of data we need, what do we need to, we literally have to fight for data. We literally have to fight for access to the data. But we know we can do that. We work with other committees to get that data to the health department, and then we are able to exercise that information. One big program that we have incorporated environmental justice data with is through our population health epidemiology program. And from there, we have our Cook County Health Atlas, which is at cookcountyhealthatlas.org. Very simple to remember, hopefully. And we have over 400 indicators. So that's rates and counts of health outcomes, of population statistics, of social determinants of health. We have a lot of this information specific to environmental justice, though. We have about 54 indicators there that look at housing, transportation, and that's all throughout the suburban Cook County. Although at the health department, our jurisdiction is a little smaller than all of suburban Cook County, but we include everyone, even outside of our jurisdiction. We find that to be very important to our neighbors who may not have as many epidemiologists as we do, or any at all. So this work has really helped us clearly define what's important in our execution of products that we have at the health department. And, we're just the data people, we just analyze information, but when we have that context and the historical context, it really supports the development of our understanding and what we can bring to the table. Also at the health department, we've recently become an academic health department. What that means is we are now able to do a little more research that we don't only have correlations, which we do have on the Health Atlas. That means this seems correlated with that. Now we can start and begin associations and really defining causations of things. And it's at a very hyperlocal level. We look at data at our municipal level, zip code level, census tracts. But that's meaningful for us because now we can associate that with our leaders and who's in charge of what, and really support that. They don't have to just look at U.S. statistics or statistics from Illinois or say, oh, well, we can look at what Chicago did and extrapolate, because it's different in suburban Cook County. Some of our concerns are different. We have an aging population. Our population is different from Chicago. Chicago's like a third racially, right? We don't have that in suburban Cook. And because of that, we do need to identify those areas. And so this EJ policy process really has been incorporated in all of our work that way.
Thank you so much. And I would add, too, the data is so important in other ways, too, like for us to secure funding to do projects. So we can write a policy, we can have ideas, but then we actually need to do implementation, which requires resources. So if we're applying for grants, we need to use the data to set the stage and say, this is the problem, and this is how we can solve it, and then we can come back to the data, or maybe not solve it, but address it. Come back to the data and see what changes there have been. So really, data is key in a lot of this work. Neha, DOTH has a long history of engaging communities in the development of new projects. Why is community involvement so essential in policy development, and what is one recommendation you have for how the county can best involve community members in planning?
Thank you for that question. It's such an important question, and as I mentioned earlier, community engagement is at the core of everything that we do. All of the projects, they start at some point, gathering surveys and asking questions to people, going out into the community, different methods of engaging people. Sometimes there are in-person events where, we try to use like summer festival or fall festival, get there, put up a table, do a pop-up event, have, a handful of questionnaires, or just generally informally talk to people and get a sense of what's going on in terms of existing conditions. What is it that, sometimes people talk about like safety, where sometimes just a simple crosswalk or a sidewalk could be a solution, but trying to really understand, where they are trying to get to, from where they are trying to get, and what kind of demographics we are talking about. So oftentimes we would also particularly focus on certain groups or focus group meetings or interviews where sometimes we would actually target like population like disabled population, which is they cannot drive a car, or it's not easy for them to get by, so what kind of modes and means do they have to get somewhere? Sometimes we would do a pop-up event in a high school and target more like school kids, where how they are going to school and what else that they would like to do. So understanding needs and aspirations is always very key and a starting point for a lot of our work. So apart from getting qualitative data, as everyone else mentioned about the data, more on the quantitative data side, we also then come back to our desk and look at GIS analysis. Also share a lot of data from public health department and other agencies as well, and try to get a sense of what's going on and what kind of findings we are coming up with in terms of recommendations. So. Public engagement and communities' feedback and input is prime to what most of the work we do. Again, transportation projects in particular, they are usually multi-jurisdictional. So, it is always like even a smallest project would be like a mile of corridor to like 5 mile, 10 mile of stretch that we are looking into, and it crosses many jurisdictional boundaries. And it's when we do a project at that scale and the scope, we do have to understand what's going on throughout that corridor, and we also have to engage a lot of different stakeholders as well. So it's local municipal staff, as well as who owns the jurisdictions of the roadways. So it could be not all roadways are owned by county. It could be local jurisdiction, or it could be a state IDOT owned roadways. So how do we go around engaging different stakeholders at different levels? They also have different procedures that needs to be followed for sometime just the funding, how it is applied at different phases, and that also impacts how we actually engage community and initially getting their surveys and then taking it back in terms of recommendations. So it's like phase 1, phase 2, and so on. Like this more on technical, like how the entire project progresses along the lifeline of a project. So it's community engagement is so key to everything. The second part of the question, in terms of recommendation, first I would say, there's already a lot of good work that we are already doing in terms of like different methods of engaging community, online surveys to like in-person, different target groups. But personally, sometimes I feel like, when we let's say like sometimes we talk of a bike lane and it is perceived differently by different people. It could be sometimes just a myth. So I think that sometimes communication and educating people as well in terms of like, when we say, let's have like, one bike path here, it doesn't mean that we are taking away the parking, or we are going to reduce the lane and the trucks cannot move around. But sometimes we just have to show them a larger picture of what the benefits are and how it is actually going to help people, and the larger goals that we are looking into. So sometimes the communication and educating and breaking those myths is, I sometimes feel like it's such a key component when we are out in the community. So I think that would be one recommendation.
Thank you. Jerry, we utilized the county's community compensation policy to ensure that members of our EJCAC were compensated for their time and expertise, a practice we are trying to expand. Why is this so important?
So this was a great question. I just thinking about it, and I know we all know this, but it's hard to put this into the context of the CAC. We live in an information economy. Across the board in every area of public life, in commerce, you name it, information has monetary value. But often, public input to decision-making is limited to the loudest voices. The result can be policies that reflect political expediency rather than serving the best interests and the real experiences of the people most impacted by the decision. In Evanston, we learned early on that asking people to contribute their own experiences and spend time with us must include some type of compensation, most often with a financial stipend, but also providing a meal or childcare, making it accessible for them to participate. Doing so respects not only their direct contribution, time and effort, but it opens access to the views of people that are often unheard because they're juggling so many other responsibilities. So we believe this is a very important practice and are grateful for the county to recognize that and hope it continues.
Thank you. So let's touch on some of the specific environmental justice issues that residents are concerned with. You saw a snapshot when we talked about the focus areas of things that came up, like water pollution, access to clean water, air pollution. Our teams presented some immediate steps related to each of these focus areas where our policy could turn into action, but many of the issues cross over multiple subject areas, and many have strong ties to public health. So Elfrida, what are some of the major health issues that we see here in Cook County that are impacted by environmental factors, and why is it so imperative that public health be tied into these conversations?
Thanks for that question. I think that when we think about public health and its impact on understanding health outcomes, a lot of people think about infectious disease, and we do have a lot of environmental things that are spread alongside with infectious or communicable diseases, and so that's a major part of it. Things that are a little more silent is around chronic diseases within our in our arena. It's not as sexy to talk about as infectious, but it's the sort of things that we've been dealing with over decades, like heart disease, cancer, lung disease. We also have things that really affect, say, like our older population falling and like not having access to accessible buildings and streetways and things like that. So in public health, we've identified things, but it's a little bit different in suburban Cook County in the sense that some outcomes are really geographically located, but that's because of how we kind of have different communities everywhere, right? So because of that, we have to have a multitude of understanding. It gets really complex, and then needs to be very, very targeted. And a lot of times people don't want to think like that, especially if you're like a systematic thinker or a person who wants to deal with complexity in a certain order and things. And that's why involvement with like community becomes super important, because it's easier for us to do something in a systematic way and understand. Doesn't mean that our health outcomes can be understood or addressed in that way. And so in public health, really getting a feel of chronic diseases that have both high mortality rates, but also the morbidity, going to the doctor and staying in the hospital because you haven't done the preventative care that you need. You don't understand or have access to nutritious foods, or if you see foods, you have them, how they may affect your body. I want to give a small little personal story. I remember when I was little, and I grew up in Chicago. I'm a true Cook County person, hardcore. But I came from a super poor family, and we would go to the local church, and we would get canned goods and get food. And all this time, it dawned on me just one day, maybe a couple years ago, like, wait a minute, all that food may not have been so good for us. To have canned food, it has tons of salt, it had tons of and I was just like, wow, you think people are doing something good for you, but not understanding how to read labels or not knowing how to say, you could just rinse it off, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to use the water within that can and things like that. That's the stuff that then I start talking to people in the community engagement team. They're like, yeah, we do this, Alfreda. Of course, we do this all the time. We tell people these things. I'm just an epi, right? I don't know that. But it's impactful, and they started to teach me at work, oh yeah, we do talk to people about this. This is important. And so I think doing good and then doing gooder, right, in public health is really something we should be striving to. And then that really does have an impact on the health outcomes, knowing not to take all of that salt intake will reduce your heart disease within our community. So I also want to say that because we have an aging community in suburban Cook County, we have to deal with things like reverse loan mortgages on homes and things like that, and we track that too in public health. So things that you wouldn't even think about. We have to protect our elderly. We have to protect our communities, and through the data, we are able to assess those things that are nuanced and not as glorified in terms of what is being funded through certain things. But now we know, and now we can call for policies to be developed, call for our legislations to be written, and then the funding to be supported. So that's how we sort of deal with that.
Thank you so much. Apostle White, tell us about what you see as the most pressing environmental justice issues or concerns in your neighborhood, community, or the populations that you work with. How are you able to incorporate those needs into this policy development?
We're trying to find ways to bring, how should I say, we don't have the grocery stores in our, out in Park Forest, we don't even have a grocery store. So people have to travel, and there's not great bus systems out there where we are. And a lot of the people, just like we just had these seniors that were in a high-rise building, and they had no air, and maybe you saw it on the news, where they couldn't get air. We had to go get them and bring them to the church and make sure that they could be taken care of and given food and so forth, because, like I said, the transportation is not there. And the water systems are need to be upgraded, as I said earlier. We're just trying to get out as much information as we can and see what the needs are and see how we can talk to those in the powers that be, the political arenas, to make sure that we can get things done for people who just, we got a aging population in the south suburbs. I don't know about some of these other communities, but they're getting up in age, and a lot of their children have gone on to be with the Lord or live in other cities. And so we have to see about our aging population in the south suburbs. And as I said before, we got old system pipes and so forth that are bursting, and they just need some upgrading in some areas in our environment. Information is so important, and as I said, we give out information. We try to inspire the people, and we give them resources. And so resources is so important for us right now in the south suburbs. We need more resources to be able to help our people.
Thank you. And I think something you said there about the example with the elderly folks who you needed to go and get, right, and to bring to the church so that they could be safe. I think that highlights really well what we're seeing a lot throughout the county and across the nation. But in a lot of communities, it's our communities of faith that are stepping up. It's community organizations that are stepping up to fill that need, to provide electricity during a power outage, to provide food in the case where folks don't have access to it. And what can we do then as government so that all of the weight isn't on our areas of faith, isn't on all of our community organizations, so that you can serve your communities also in other ways. And it's not always like in an emergency, right? How can we
Right.
Yeah, how can we set a baseline and how can we provide services in a way that doesn't have you always having to respond?
Is there a way where we can have the county to put facilities or open places where food and where information comes to us as well, and where people can go and get some of the things that they need and might not have the car to go pick stuff up or anything. As I said before, grocery stores are not available in our area, in Park Forest and in that area, and the bus transportation is not on a regular basis. They got to stand out for long periods of time to get places and get back. And if you're seniors, it's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Jerry, the draft policy was put out to the community in January of this year, and we received hundreds of comments from residents and community organizations about how to improve upon the draft. What were some of your takeaways from the public input we received?
Well, Deborah, you did a great job of summarizing the issues that were brought up during the public comment period. I just thought it was gratifying to hear the level of sophistication, the understanding, the clarity that came out of not only the written input in the survey, but the discussions at the public workshops. I was just really impressed and how well it echoed some of the same issues that we've been working on, and the intersection with climate justice. Because it's not, you don't draw a bright line between environmental justice and climate justice. We are facing things like lack of air conditioning and people, raising utility bills because of tree canopy being lacking in some areas, and it's all related. Also, children will be drinking more water as the temperature rises. We all will be drinking more water, but especially kids are impacted, and that's definitely climate related. So I guess my biggest takeaway is that while all of the issues are very complex and the solutions are certainly varied, the people in Cook County are pretty realistic about what it's going to take to address them. They're pretty willing to share ideas and common experiences, and this has been a platform for sharing that hadn't existed before, and it's really important. And especially now, I think, because we've learned how threatened we all are by national policies that are seeking to divide us and to downplay environmental justice on a national level. So we understand at the county level, at the municipal level, that this is up to us. And I'm just really grateful that we're doing this.
Thank you so much. Neha, development of the policy document itself is only one piece of the puzzle. As the county moves from policy development into implementation, what would you like to see happen within Cook County operations or programs as a result of the EJ policy? And how do you see your department using the policy to inform your programs?
All right, thank you for that question. So first, I would say we continue to build on the success that we have already achieved. For example, I would like to mention a program called Chloride Reduction Initiative, for which the DOT, my department, received NACO award for this year. So what this program is that we have to balance public safety and environmental health. We do get, snow and freezing rain and ice on our roads, so we do have to salt our roads to make it safer for people to get around, to drive. But at the same time, all of this salt that is now, there on ground, it is getting into our land and water and impacting our native ecosystem. And it's making it, more and more saltier. And, sort of on a long term, I mean, it reduces the biodiversity that exists there naturally. So this initiative was to actually sort of kind of reduce that, salting of our roads with different techniques. So, for example, when we are pre-wetting the salt before application, then it sort of adheres to the surface of the pavement. And that sort of helps, we could reduce the amount of salt that we are throwing on the road because, now that it sticks to the road. So that's like one strategy. The other one is, already sort of pre-treating the pavements with brine, which is an anti-icing solution and agent. So some technique like that where, we are already making the roadways ready. Also optimizing some of these salt application rates and sort of reducing that wastage. So these are like very small steps, but they add up. And so under this program, on our Cook County owned and maintained roadways, we have been starting that initiative for which has been recognized by NACO award this year. So this is like one example of what we can do across the county, build upon the success that we have already started. Similarly, there are other programs like Stormwater Management Project Implementation Program, which is also quite well recognized, where we work with a lot of communities which are much more prone to flooding every year. And so this project was also working, with many key partners, and it was, I think there were a number of projects about throughout the county for a total of $20 million program. And it included building traditional gray water projects such as conveyance and storage improvements, and also supporting many innovative projects throughout the county, especially in communities that are much more vulnerable to the urban flooding frequently. Similarly, there are also many above and beyond efforts, much more technical on the engineering side. For example, like Cook County roadways are considered local roadways for engineering standards that we apply. So what we've done is we are applying higher stringent standards, which, IDOT, which is the Illinois Department of Transportation, applies on their roadways. For example, like some of our waterway crossings, like bridges and major culverts. So we generally leave out that, clearance for the waterway from low beam elevation to the headway elevation. So usually for local roadways, it's like 1 feet, but we usually go with 2 feet as a design standard. So, smaller, like above and beyond efforts on how we really build our roadways and bridges and culverts can go on a long way in addressing a lot of the sustainability in our infrastructure. Similarly, like, we are also, my department also works closely with many other sister agencies like Forest Preserves of Cook County, working through, some of the landscape management and ecological restoration, wherever we control our right-of-way or wherever possible. Control some of the invasive species removal, and sometimes it could also mean, having some cost upfront to put like native plantations or putting plant plugs or seeds that are required on our right-of-way. But again, it's a long-term environmental benefit that we could gain. So I think there could be a lot of this kind of efforts that could happen, even just within our Cook County agencies and different departments. And so EJ, it provides a wonderful framework. Now we will also, starting early next year, we'll be starting with a new long-range transportation plan, which lays out the transportation vision for the region, for Cook County, for like next 5 to 10 years down the line. For example, like right now we have Connecting Cook County. We'll be updating that and starting with a new one. So that's a really good opportunity where we'll look forward to, incorporating some of the action items and some of the items from EJ, as it progresses further. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you for those very specific examples. And I think the power of, again, these groups coming together under OUP is that that's just a few great examples that we heard from one department. And if we multiply that across OUP, all of our departments, all of our agencies, and everyone just makes a couple small changes or adjustments to meet the environmental needs of our community members, what a huge impact we can have. So I have one more question for our panelists, Apostle White and Jerry. This one's going to be for both of you. Each of our EJCAC members was able to bring a unique perspective to this process. There are over 5 million residents in Cook County, representing a wide range of backgrounds, demographics, and needs. How can we learn from this EJCAC process to help improve or inform the county's community engagement strategy? Apostle White, we'll start with you.
Well, how many did you say?
5 million?
5 million. How do we reach them? How can we reach out to them? I mean, it's not just about mail. It's not about people coming. We got to give information to them about what we have available. A lot of the things that we have, and I keep going to seniors because in the Southland we got a lot of seniors that have moved that way to get out of the city from the hustle bustle as well as the crime issues and so forth. I think we got to find a way to galvanize committees and people to go out and give the information. If we have to knock on doors or whatever that is through our communities to let them know that these things that you're sharing with us that you have that they might not know about. And I know we're online, but a lot of the seniors might not be online and so forth to be able to get that information out. And our environment in the south suburbs, as I say, is transportation is not as great as it is in the city and in north. I don't know about northern suburbs, but the southern suburbs are not good with transportation. And so I think we just got to get the information to those of us who are in organizations, got organizations willing to get out and put information out so they'll be able to know what's available.
Great, thank you. Jerry.
Thanks for the question. When I started as a CAC member, I was a little worried that Evanston's experience as a North Shore community, even though we have a history of racial injustices, that it would be trivialized next to Chicago neighborhoods and South Side suburbs, where more severe exposures to hazardous pollutants have occurred, along with disenfranchisement of residents who really want to impact the decisions that affect their quality of lives. I learned that my worry was misplaced. There are certainly matters of degree and severity, but we all share some common barriers like institutional racism, the failure of governing bodies to observe and respond creatively to disparate treatment, and the overarching need to really listen to residents that are most impacted. So, in my view, the county's community engagement strategy should really focus on broadening access to the conversation. As Apostle White just mentioned, not everyone is connected. We have a disparity in broadband access, and transportation is a huge barrier. So really looking creatively at how to engage and foster communication among and between jurisdictions, among and between neighborhoods within the county. And then most important, demonstrating that action, not rhetoric, will be the result. And that will involve tracking data, looking at trends over time that we've gotten it, we're doing it, and it's making a difference.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's a nice, positive way to end this conversation. I do want to say I feel so incredibly honored to work with these groups of people in this environmental justice policy process. Starting with community members can always be a risk because we want to make sure that you can trust us, but you have no reason to trust us. And so it's very important for us to come in and to hear the stories and know that we then on the internal working group can take the stories of our community members from those private conversations into the other conversations. So I don't know how many times over the past year plus that we've been working together that I'll be in a different meeting about a different project, and then I'll say, well, in my community advisory committee, and I can share a story from somebody. And that makes that makes a really big difference because we can't always have Apostle White or Jerry in the space with us. So I commit to you to continue sharing those stories and to continue helping to elevate all of our community's voices in this work. And with that being said, thank you so much to my panelists for all being here. And I'd like to open it up if anybody online or in the room has any questions.
I have no questions, but just a comment. I just want to lift up the work that you guys are doing because it's not only the policy that we're crafting, it's the work that's already being done and will continue to be done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I did have a quick question. I think you highlighted a lot of the cross-departmental work that's gone into this policy, and I think that it offers a great model of a way that we can approach this work that's community-informed and data-driven. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you could see other departments and bureaus like using this as a model for their work in the future, how they might be able to put this into practice more broadly?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. One is like the logistics side of how to incorporate community voices. We only had 13 people out of 5 million, again, who are on our community advisory committee. All the steps to get those 13 people on board and engaged, connecting with our community compensation policy, having people be available for meetings at a time that works with folks, even if it's virtual, making sure that folks have the technology needed. We had a participant that we wanted to have engaged, and she didn't have a computer. She didn't have reliable internet access, as we alluded to in other places, and this was during our town hall process. And she said, can you deliver a computer to me? Can I get that help? Can I get that resource? And so there are those real clear logistics of just, we learned from this, here's what we saw, here are some challenges. Challenges to accessibility for the online document, for example. I still haven't necessarily figured out all the details when you've got a document that has however many footnotes, and to make that navigable by a screen reader, for example. The physical limitations of getting to a town hall or those spaces. So we were able to learn from that, and we can share that with other folks in the county. We've been working very closely with our president's office on community engagement and seeing how we can apply some of that to the work we do. But it's also, again, I think really emphasizing that two-way street. We do have a lot of touch points with community members, and we represent Cook County. We, as every individual employee, if we go out into a public space and you say you work for Cook County, it doesn't matter what department you work in, it doesn't matter what agency you work in, if they have questions about the county, whether that's property taxes or flooding or anything else, they are going to ask you. And so we all need, I think, to be on the same page about how we respond to that. How can each of us embody the county's values and share that with anybody we encounter, even if we don't have the specific information, that we can say, I hear you, I want to help you, and here's a resource that can get you there. And so I think that example of just all of us in our everyday action is another one. Any of my other county staff have any reflections on that, of how we can incorporate lessons learned here?
Well, I know for us at Public Health, we really do engage our communities through different processes. And one is being our community health improvement plan. We call that like a CHIP. We do what we call community health assessments, but we're evaluating the entire local health public health system, and that means our clinics, our hospitals, our community-based organizations and partners we work with. So that's just built into the process of a public health department. So we do engage with communities, and then throughout our programming, we work with our communities to support them. We even had a program with our lead program where they actually did go knock on doors, and we really did leave pamphlets and things and door hangers when people weren't there, but when they were there, we were able to engage with them. And we do things like that all the time. COVID was one of the biggest tests we had to face, and to get in community involvement, community engaged in, like, how do we help you, how do we help each other throughout these processes. So I think actually working with our committee in public health is serving as a model for that work, but it's because public health is in everything that we do as public servants. So we've already have that incorporated, and we would like to expand it more. I mean, COVID did give us the platform for people to know who we are and what we actually do. I remember being in college thinking like, oh, I'm taking this anthropology and public health course. What is that? Oh, doctors don't just make me get a shot. Oh, it's like, it's a whole system around that. It's not just that one doctor that made me do it, right? Like one doctor that got me, it's a whole system built in place. But I don't think a lot of people still don't know what public health is and what it truly means. And they think like, oh, it's just, Alfreda who thinks she's the Anthony Fauci of the South Side. I do. Yeah. It is also really built into public health. So I think we model it, and we need to promote it and showcase it. And I do think we are at the time that we can do that. And we would love people like you to join us, young folks, to join us, do that.
Thank you.
I was sorry, just as a follow-up to that, I think it's another great example of how the data from CCDPH is being leveraged in a project like this. Are there other ways that departments or bureaus are using it? Like, how do you engage across OUP with that data?
Well, we give data all the time. We have tons of data requests, but we do have a wonderful opportunity with our Board of Commissioners and during those meetings to showcase how we use our data to support the initiatives that we have throughout the county, and then specific to our health and hospital system, and also, of course, the public health. So we showcase it that way. We do, press releases. We do a lot of social media. We work within our community-based organizations, other stakeholders. We have partnerships with other universities like Northwestern, University of Illinois, DePaul University. Like, we really are able to touch a lot of places and spaces because of public health and people's specific interests. But it really escalated after COVID. Most of they kind of left us alone, before they were like, the health department, oh God, like nobody cared about us. But after COVID, it really did help us have an opportunity. But we also had tons of funding, and we had all these wonderful people who had these wonderful ideas they've been hanging on for years and years, and now they get to execute them. So we are here, we're ready, we want to continue it, and we really are fighting. And the Office of the President is super fighting for us, right? Yeah. What we're dealing with nowadays. And they really are fighting to keep all of this stuff going. So we are super appreciative.
Yeah, and I will say on that note, having that reliable, accurate, thoughtful data coming from within our county, I know it makes me feel personally proud and breathe a sigh of relief that regardless of what's happening with public health and lack of data, or data being pulled back or ignored if it doesn't tell the story we want to hear, to know that we have an agency that's completely devoted to giving us the truth, whatever that truth looks like, and the numbers, and you and all of your team who work to make that happen. So thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we wrap up for today? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again to our panelists.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful
Thanks,
evening.
Apostle.
And thank you so much, Apostle White, for joining us on the phone.
Well, God bless you. I appreciate all of you and what great information you've given us today and what challenge we've received from you to go back and try to make it better for our communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work you do.